Hi, it's Scott Vogel on sex addiction, and I'm going to talk to you about what is masturbation addiction. Masturbation is a normal behavior in men and women, and when it's, quote, normal and under control, it's part of a normal, healthy sex life. Studies, though, have shown that there are health benefits to masturbation, such as lowering stress and blood pressure. However, the problem is for sex addicts is when it becomes a sex addiction, it interferes with the person's entire life. Sex addicts usually will feel compelled to masturbate, oftentimes to the point of physical pain or even injury to the genitalia. They spend large amounts of time masturbating, or they do it when it's inappropriate or in inappropriate places such as work or in public or in vehicles, potentially getting caught. Now, what makes it an addiction? An overactive sex drive can account for some cases of masturbation addiction, but another common cause is masturbation to curb negative emotions, stress, pressure, fear, anxiety. It can be also boredom, loneliness, but as I mentioned, there's an awful lot of other negative emotions that come into play, which masturbation is used to change those negative emotions. Normally, sex produces a natural high beyond the immediate physical gratification, and that's good. But with a sex addict, it follows a low. A low is created after the high. And what happens with a normal person is they get the high and then it's like, okay, fine, they move on. But with a sex addict, they have to counter that low with masturbation. And what that does is it starts a cycle over and over and over again, because after the high, it produces this low, and then they have to get that high again, and it just turns into a never-ending cycle. Now, what happens with a sex addict? These behaviors continue despite the consequences. And there always are negative consequences to understand that it is a masturbation addiction. And there's injury to the normal sex life. So normal sex doesn't happen anymore. Now they're wanting to masturbate all the time. And they start masturbating at work, and they can't stop. That's the key here, is their inability to stop. So what is the treatment for masturbation addiction? Well, first, it always involves that the person recognize that they have a problem with any other addiction, with any other type of sex addiction. Before treatment and recovery can begin, the addict needs to realize that they have a problem. And they have to understand that they're not a bad person, and they should not feel ashamed that it is an addiction. And for years, masturbation was under a stigma. And much of it's lifted, but a lot of the stigma still exists, and it can make a sex addict extremely hesitant about admitting they have a problem and seeking treatment for it. In therapy, the person's masturbation is addressed as the core of the treatment. And what it does is it involves replacing the thoughts about masturbation with other behaviors. When a sex addict thinks about masturbating, they might be encouraged first to acknowledge what thoughts they're having, then to channel that thought into something else. Now, the therapist doesn't have them try to eliminate the thought or ignore them, but instead move to something different and recognize that masturbation for a sex addict will only make them feel worse because of that low they experience. And what they're recommending is to use replacement behaviors. So they replace the thought that they have of masturbating with something healthier. It can be anything so long as it doesn't have a sexual component. It could be thinking about a hobby. It could be thinking about a walk, a run, a game, a hobby, prayer, meditation, or some form of healthy distraction. Whatever is easiest to access when the urge strikes. It's like creating a movie in the mind that you can push play whenever that begins and go to what some call a safe place or a happy place, so that that plays in the mind to overpower the addictive thoughts, the masturbation, sexually addictive thoughts. Now, masturbation is on its own, but it's often accompanied by a pornography addiction. Now, if a person is battling one of those addictions, chances are they can't indulge in the other. Because what happens is the two will inevitably join. So if someone has a masturbation addiction and a pornography addiction, they're going to join and they're going to become much more powerful. The same holds true for other addictive behaviors like cybersex or phone sex. They accompany masturbation. Also, use of alcohol and drugs can also lead to increasing the intensity of masturbation. Many addicts feel that in getting treatment that they'll have to become abstinent and give up sex completely. That's not the truth at all. Sex is a healthy part of life, as is masturbation. What happens in treatment is the person learns what healthy masturbation is, what healthy sex is, so that they don't have to use it as an addiction. So we've talked about healthy versus unhealthy. Healthy masturbation is good. Unhealthy masturbation goes from the highs to the lows, where the sex addict, the masturbation addict, needs to get back to that high, and it creates a cycle that's never ending. And what makes it an addiction, masturbation addiction, is that the person has negative consequences. It's affecting their lives, and they have the inability to stop, which means they don't have the ability to stop. And then the treatment, 12-step recovery. Treatment is recognizing, admitting. It's about therapy. It's about acknowledging the addiction and replacing it, thought shifting with other things healthier, and staying away from combining other addictions with masturbation addiction. Please visit our YouTube channel on sex addiction for more videos on sex addiction and recovery from sex addiction. You can also visit our blog on sexaddiction.com, where you'll find a free video explaining what sex addiction is, the 7 symptoms of sex addiction, the 4 traumas of sex addiction, and the 4 faulty core beliefs that are set up by the traumas addiction, as well as the solution, the 7 paths of success in recovery from sex addiction. You'll also find more information about sex addiction and sex addiction recovery, articles, videos, and audios. This is Scott Vogel on sex addiction.